What's up guys? So this is my tutorial series, and this is my first one that I'm going to be releasing. This one is going to be on how to make your own vape juice. I think that would be a sufficient first tutorial. So I'm going to go over a couple of things, and I'll go over how you mix it via the software, and then I'll also cover me actually going through and mixing flavors so you can kind of see hand in hand how it works. So to start, the first thing I would like to cover, just briefly, is I want to make sure that we understand a little bit about safety, right? So we are working with potentially dangerous materials. Nicotine, of course, is a poison, so we want to be very careful with that. Outside of the nicotine, most of the other compounds that we work with are relatively safe. I do want to make a note though that the actual flavorings that we use, those flavorings can irritate the skin if you like drip it directly on your skin. So one thing that's very important, I can't stress enough, is make sure you've got a good set of these bad boys right here, these gloves. That's right. If you don't have them, don't mix anything. Go out and buy some first. Don't do any mixing unless you got gloves. Trust me on that. Because even though you don't think you're gonna spill something or get something on your hands, it will eventually happen. Trust me, I've done it. These are things that you're putting in your lungs, so you want to make sure you have a clean workspace. You don't want, you don't want bad things getting into your vape fluid. So gloves, clean workspace, two very important things. So the next thing I want to go over is the materials. So what kind of materials do you need to even start making vape juice? Well, you need, depending on how you're going to do your mixing, and there's two ways you can do mixing. You can either mix by volume, which is by measuring the amount of fluid that you're using, or you can mix by weight, where you're actually weighing the amount of fluid that you're mixing together. Now, I personally go with the weight method just because it's not any more expensive than the mixing by volume method, and it's much more accurate in my opinion. The first thing you're going to need in mixing by weight, if that's the way you're going to go, is you're going to need one of these bad boys right there, these scales. So what this is going to allow you to do is stick your little bottle doodadder on there, right? And I can show you what that looks like. So stick your little bottle doodadder on there, and you're going to click this little on and off button right here, and then that's going to tell you what your weight is, right? And then you'll tear it off. Now what that means is that when you tear something, it doesn't mean you're like ripping it off, right? Don't do that, because that's not the intent here. The intent is to basically clear it off. So you'll hit the on button, right? And that's going to give you your values here. I don't know what it's saying because it's being dumb. And then you'll hit this tear button, which basically zeroes it out. So you don't want to count for the weight of the bottle. You just want to count for what you're putting in it. That's why you would tear it. Aside from that, you're also going to need some syringes, right? And my favorite syringes are these guys. I love these guys. They're glass, so they last a really long time. Also, you can like take them apart, and you can clean them. All of the tools that you use and everything that you use to make your fluid, make sure it's clean, right? And that's another reason why I use glass syringes for the most part, because you can clean glass well, right? And if you leave moisture in these guys and you put them away, they can start harboring bacteria, and then bacteria ultimately can end up getting transferred into your vape fluid, and that can ultimately really result in you getting sicker easier, or maybe even getting a lung infection or something, which you don't want to do. So make sure you keep these guys clean and dry, completely dry, and that's why I would always suggest going with the glass syringes. So bottles, that's the next thing I'm going to cover here. So your bottles are what you use to put your fluid in, right? That's what you're making your vape juice in. Now, this guy here, this is a 30 milliliter bottle. They sell them in a lot of different quantity sizes. You can get 30, you can get 60. Let me show you what a 60 milliliter looks like. So this is a 60 milliliter here. And then they go much larger than this. You can go up to 120. I think you can get even bigger than that, whatever size you want to get. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about what a beaker is. So I'm gonna grab this beaker here for you. So this is a beaker. Right, and you might be thinking, well, what the hell do I need that for? reason you would need this is for your propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. I'm going to cover that a little bit later. But propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, you know, take your PG and take your VG and dump it into these beakers. It's going to be much easier for you to do your measurements with. So by doing that, you'll be able to take your syringe, put your syringe in there and pull the PG or VG up. It'll make your life easier. Trust me. Don't stick it in the bottle and then try to extract it out. I did that in the beginning too. And, it just leads to, you know, a bottle flying across the room or it spilling or something. Just don't do it. Trust me on this. Alright guys, so the first step in making our E-Juice or Vape Juice, whichever you want to call it, is going to be to find a recipe to build off of. So there's many ways to do that, but over here on Vape Dish, this is the way that I would go. So I'd go to vapedish.com, go to recipes here. This is going to take you into all of the different recipes. You can choose any one of these to build off of for this tutorial, but I'm going to go with the strawberry since strawberry is kind of my favorite. I'm more of a sweeter flavor guy. I can't spell today, but that's okay. So we'll go into this strawberry taffy bar. So once you get into the actual recipe itself, it's just going to give you a breakdown and tell you about it. This is from the author, so this would be me, you know, and then it'll give you a breakdown of the flavors here. Now these are percentages, so that's the percentages of the total amount of fluid that you're actually making. So to actually mix this recipe, what we'll want to do is head over to this recipe, build recipe in mixing lab button. We'll click this guy, and this is going to take us to the mixing lab. So once you get into this mixing lab, it can look a little daunting at first. There's a lot of parameters here, and there's a lot of things to kind of take account for. So, but I'm going to go through it, so by the end of this, you should be comfortable going through this. You should be an absolute expert. You should be able to mix anything in the world. No, I'm just kidding. But you'll be able to use this and mix your own recipes. So there's two components to the mixing lab. There's an advanced section, and then there's this section you're looking at here. So we'll go over this first, and then we're going to touch a little bit on the advanced, because the advanced is going to allow you to do things that the basic won't. So it will allow you to like pick your own custom parameters, for example. But let's go through this so that way you understand what each section actually means. So the first thing is the total batch size. That's the total amount of the recipe you're going to make. So depending on the bottle that you're using, that might be, you know, 30 milliliters, 60 milliliter, 120 milliliter. So PG-VG ratio, that's your base. So propylene glycol and vegetable glycerins are the bases that are used in vape fluid. So a typical ratio is around 30-70. That's 30% PG to 70% VG. So your nicotine source, this guy, this is the actual amount of nicotine on the bottle. So it's when you buy that bottle of nicotine, it should have a nicotine level on it. This is where this comes into play. So this is the total milligrams per milliliter on the bottle. So what's got selected here is 24. So if I left it this way, it would be 24 milligrams per milliliter. And the nicotine is usually comes in a base. It's either going to be 100% PG, or it could be 100% VG, or it could be a mix. It could be 50-50. So you can get it in different bases. So this is where you'll set those parameters here. So the total nicotine in mix, that's the total amount of nicotine that you want to put in your recipe. So that might be 0. Maybe you don't want nicotine at all. Maybe you want 2 milligrams per milliliter. Maybe you want 3, or so on and so on. This is where you would set that. Then the flavors in mix, this is again your flavor breakdown. It gives you a little checkbox here on the right telling you whether it's PG or VG. Now this is a custom parameter you'll put in. So when you purchase your flavor, you should be able to see on the flavoring whether it's a PG base or a VG base. So this section here is your final parameter. So this is what ultimately you're going to end up adding to your recipe. So this would be your nicotine, PG, VG, strawberry, sweet. So these are your flavorings. These two buttons here on the top. This one is for your weight, mixing by weight, which we covered. So this would be your grams, And then ML would be mixing by volume, so doing measurement mixing. So let's go into the advanced tab real quick and I'll quickly show you that. So if we go into the advanced tab, you'll see here that basically it's the same thing. It just allows you to add your own custom parameters. So maybe I have a 50 milliliter bottle, right? So you can change that to whatever value you want. So the fact that it's advanced just means that it opens it completely up. So you can put whatever parameters that you want in it.
Okay, so the first thing I want to start off with is the nicotine. And usually what I'll do is I'll shake up that nicotine bottle pretty well, because after it sits for a while, the nicotine has a tendency to settle at the bottom. So mix it really well, and then we'll get it ready to go into the syringe. And then we will take that and start putting that into the bottle. Now, take note here that I've got this thing on the scale. I've teared the scale, so I've reset it, and I'll start applying the nicotine into the bottle. And I'll slowly fill it up until it hits the measurement that I have specified on the software. Now, if you add a little too much, that's okay. You can always take it out, like I'm doing here. But this is why we start with the nicotine. Just make sure that the measurement on the scale itself reflects what it shows inside of the software on the nicotine section as closely as possible. So the next thing we're going to need to do is get all of our flavors lined up and get those ready to start adding to our recipe. So just like the nicotine, we're going to want to start adding our flavors, and we're going to want to start adding them in the order that it shows on the application. If you notice here, I did tear the scale, so I cleared it before we started adding anything. So we'll go ahead and start adding our flavors one at a time, and we'll want to get it as closely as possible to the measurements on the software. If you go a little over or a little under, that's usually okay. But as you start getting closer to that final number, you want to start slowing down. So you want to start going to drops, and you'll see me starting to do that here in a minute. So here I'm getting closer to that final number, and I start slowing down and just dropping it until I hit that final destination number. Now I'm going to go ahead and fast forward the video here a little bit, but basically you'll want to continue along until all of the flavors are already added. So after adding the flavors, it's time to add the sweeteners. And what you're going to want to do is get as close as possible to that final measurement as it shows inside of the software as possible. If you remember what I was saying earlier, the closer you get with the sweetener, the better. If you get too much, it could drown out the flavor. If it's not enough, you may not get the flavor profile that the recipe is designed to have. And now it's time to start adding our bases. So I usually start with PG, or propylene glycol, and you'll see that we've got it in the beaker here. So we'll pull it up inside of a syringe. Now typically in these syringes I just pull it directly up into it because it is a little thick. And then I'll start adding it and getting it as close to the measurement on the software as possible. With PG, it's okay if you're a little bit off. Just get it as close as you possibly can. Now another crucial step, as soon as you're done adding the PG, will be to actually mix up your bottle. You're going to want to do that before you add the vegetable glycerin, because at this time the fluid is still thin and you can get a nice mix on it and get everything all mixed in together. So the very last thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add your vegetable glycerin. While I don't have video of the actual vegetable glycerin being added to the recipe here, it's very simple. Just as the propylene glycol, you'll pull it up into your syringe and go ahead and add it to your recipe until the bottle is full or the measurement reaches the measurement that it says on the software. Thanks for watching, guys. Any comments that you have or any questions or anything, just leave them in the comments section and I'll try to get back to you if I can.